Hello and welcome to the Daily Dose. This week we have titled, What Christians Should Know About Christmas. Starting from a very young age, I was involved in the Christmas programs at my church. And we didn't just have one program, but two completely different programs each and every year. I remember practicing all the verses to every carol with my mom so I could be completely memorized for these programs. I remember congregation members being so impressed that an elementary student knew more verses of these very common, very popular carols than they did. Now looking back on how carols and hymns have been a focus all my life, I've started to recognize all the different narratives that we learn through song and how some of them actually never happened. It was just something added to the story. Like for instance, we know the song, "We three kings of Orient are," but nowhere in the Bible does it say that the wise men were kings or that there were only three of them. All we know is that they came from the east following a star and that they had three gifts. Not that there were only three of them, but I guess "We three kings" sings a lot better than "many smart people" or "some wise men" or who knows. Or one of my favorites is "Angels we have heard on high." The lyrics go, "Angels we have heard on high sweetly singing o'er the plains." But the Bible doesn't actually say anything about these angels singing. The text actually says there was a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, not singing, praising God and saying. Yes, one could make a point to say that singing is a way of praising, but that is something that we have put into this story. So today, for something a little different, I will read through the Christmas story and point out a few instances of things that we have maybe heard or believed, but is not actually in the original Christmas story. I think first off, it's good to mention that the amount of content written in the four Gospels about the birth of Jesus is not nearly as much as I would ever imagine. Matthew starts out with the genealogy of Jesus, which if you are like most people, we kind of skip over that part, even though there's a lot of meaning behind it. Just get to the baby, right? And then there are 7 verses in Matthew on the announcement of Jesus, which has more to do with Mary and Joseph finding out they were pregnant and how they were going to deal with it. The Gospel of Matthew talks about the wise men and Herod. The other 3 Gospels do not mention anything about the wise men. Matthew also talks about King Herod killing all the male infants under 2 and Jesus and his family fleeing to Egypt. However, there is no mention of this in any other Gospels or really in any historical readings outside of this Gospel. The Gospel of Mark starts when Jesus and John the Baptist are adults and doesn't even mention the birth. The Gospel of John starts with "in the beginning," which is a nod back to Genesis, the first book of the Bible, and then does not say anything about the actual birth. Which leaves us with the Gospel of Luke, which is the only actual mention of the birth of Jesus. So we will read Luke starting in chapter 2. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So starting with just the first 3 verses, we already can read that Jesus was born in Bethlehem not out of choice, but because of the invading power of that time made them travel to Bethlehem. This was around 100 miles of a journey that Joseph and pregnant Mary had to travel. When we sing, "O little town of Bethlehem," we might assume that this was planned. It sounds so sweet that it was planned by Mary and Joseph, or that God told them to go there, but it was the oppressing power of the day, the Roman Empire, who made them go there. Poor timing, if you ask me. And it continues in verse 4. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them. All right, we have a lot to unpack in verses 4 through 7. First off, verse 4 says Joseph went to Bethlehem with Mary. There is no actual mention anywhere about a donkey ride. And I don't know if it's just me or what, but in my head, they made it to Bethlehem just in the nick of time to have baby Jesus before he came. And it doesn't say that anywhere. Just that when they were there doing the census, it became time to have their baby. And it also says nothing about an innkeeper turning them away. How many pageants and Christmas programs do we have the innkeeper saying, "We have no room"? It doesn't say that anywhere. And finally, it seems pretty common for us to think of Jesus being born in a stable, which looks really nice in nativity sets, doesn't it? But it is much more likely that he was born in a cave or some sort of shelter built in a hill. In all 4 Gospels, there are only 7 verses of the actual birth of Jesus. Incredible. All of that to say, no matter what you grew up believing or singing or anything else, we still have a God who comes to us in Jesus, Emmanuel, which means God with us. So no matter what your life looks like this season, I wish you the hope, the peace, the joy, and the love that comes with the birth of Jesus, our Savior. Thank you so much for joining us. If you watch this on Facebook, we would love it if you'd hit like and share the good news. If you watched it on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. And if you watched it on television, invite family and friends to watch with you. God bless.